Your voice, your opinion, your community. Fact TV, free speech, protected.
On the long road, won't turn around. Secrets in the shadows, lost and found. Truth in every echo, loud and clear. Keep on with the long road, no more fear.
Hello, this is The Long Road. I'm your host, Kris Roberts. And what I'm going to talk about today is the cost of war. In 1990, when the Soviet Union fell and broke apart into the different countries, we thought we were going to have the peace benefit. Instead of spending billions and billions of dollars on war and potential war, we thought we were going to get a benefit. Well, that benefit never happened. And East Germany came free, Poland came free, and people were looking at them. Wow, these are poor countries, been under the socialism, communism of the USSR. So we are figuring these countries can be free. These countries can be new outlets for consumer goods and everything. And then one country after another kept joining NATO. So part of the deal was Ukraine would never be part of NATO because Russia wanted a buffer. Russia's had a history of constantly being invaded. You had Hitler who invaded Russia. Excuse me, you had Napoleon invaded Russia. The Germans fought Russia on the Eastern Front during World War I. And at times when Poland was a stronger kingdom than a stronger country, they even invaded Russia. So it's gone back and forth. United States, we did not have much of a problem. The biggest time we've got close to maybe being endangered was 1962 with the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's the closest. America, since the Civil War, America has, quote, never had to suffer a foreign power coming into the United States and destroying cities and major parts of our manufacturing base and things like that, utilities. Okay. So United States is feeling good. Russia is now into small pieces. Now we have a peace dividend. Part of that peace dividend was the United States military downsized by about 1 million people, no longer needed. Now the non-military is about 1.4 million. Excuse me. And then when they need extra people, they just call up the National Guard or the Reserve. Well, the Gulf War, everybody understood the Gulf War, another country invading a sovereign state. And so when Saddam invaded Kuwait, all these countries got together and said it would not stand. And then you had the invasion into Iraq. and Kuwait ended up being free. And really, for the most part, a lot of the country paid the United States to fight. So we kind of became mercenaries, and the war basically cost us nothing. It cost lives and injuries, but the war financially really didn't cost us anything at all. In some places, when you look at it based on how people do it, we actually made a profit on the war. So we had all these rules in place. Everything was going peacefully. People were benefiting from the peace dividend. Then 9/11 happened with the terrorist attacks. 9/11 attack caused the problem. It was a terrorist attack, but it wasn't a national attack. It isn't like one country attacking other. So if Russia attacks Ukraine, so we know who the combatants are. And basically, the people who attacked had no country, had no nationality, and could not be considered part of any militia. It could not be considered part of another country. Okay? So they were based in, Saddam Hussein was based in Afghanistan, been training in Afghanistan. He was part of the Mujahideen, which the United States funded in the Afghan-Russian war, and he stayed there. So the United States went in, attacked in Afghanistan to neutralize Saddam Hussein and Al-Qaeda. Again, accepted. NATO countries went in along. Germany sent people, Canada sent people, Australia, which is not NATO but is CETO, and then Germany. A lot of these countries went with the United States with the hope of eliminating or decapitalizing Al-Qaeda. But the world changed. And it was the United States that caused the world to change. United States invaded Iraq on the premises that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. Even when some of the people who have been in there went to and said, hey, Iraq doesn't have any weapons of mass destruction, those reports were put aside. So here you are, you have the United States attacking a sovereign country. Basically a sovereign country that did not attack the United States. They were stuff saying that, hey, Saddam Hussein supported the terrorist bombers that conducted 9/11. So we changed international protocol and we invaded a country. How did that change? That changed the world. And today, you got Israel fighting in Lebanon, doing to Lebanon what they did to Gaza. But the thing in Gaza, it's not really a recognized country. You got Gaza and you got the West Bank. But Lebanon is a country. And now, in their desire to go against Hezbollah, they could end up destroying Lebanon. France came in and said, no, there will not be a war with Lebanon. But that comes a catch. The Lebanese army and navy and air force are not at war at Israel. But if Israel keeps bombing and destroying Lebanon, Lebanon may be forced to continue and get into the war. And now what would happen is you have two sovereign states in a war. Okay? Israel is attacked with impunity. Russia attacked Ukraine with impunity. And so Russia, Ukraine, Israel, Lebanon, you have Yemen. So you got all these entities. So you get Hittu in Lebanon, but you also got Somalia and other places. So instead of having a world of peace, okay, they decided, well, there's no punishment factor anymore because the United States lost its moral credibility when it attacked Iraq. The United States had no legal justification by international standards to invade Iran. And when I was doing the research on this, it was really hard to look at it. You know, in the Congressional Research Service, this is from 2019, for the War on Defense from 2001 to 2019, the United States government gave the Department of Defense $1.5 trillion in that discretionary funding for them to use any way they want. $1.5 trillion over and above the regular budget. $1.5 trillion. So it's really hard to look at that. So you could have budgets of $700-800 billion and the DOD is saying it's not enough. And I go, we spent over $800 billion, $900 billion, and it's only a few years before the DOD gets $1 trillion more a year. They pay for the ships, they pay for the people, they pay for weapons and all this other kind of stuff. And then they go and say, anytime we go to war, every time we fire a bullet, every time we fire a missile, we need more money. Okay? So, if we go back to September 11th, back and then down to today, okay, fighting the U.S. federal budget that prioritizes peace, for budget, economy, security, and shared prosperity. Right now, or a couple hours ago, since September 11th, the United States has paid basically it was 9,667,083,811 and $811,479. And so basically right now, with the cost and the continued stuff that's going on, the United States is paying an awful lot of money, has paid and will continue to pay because most of this money was created out of thin air. All this was really money that we didn't have. So you go to the Russian and Ukraine war. Right now, up to a couple months ago, Russia, it predicted the top Department of Defense, another one, saying Russia is spent about $211 billion. And Ukraine has been given $223 billion. So we're just looking at the war. That's $500 billion. Okay. Russia's is starting to get damage, infrastructure damage. Ukraine is getting pretty wiped out. Where are the hundreds of billions of dollars going to come to rebuild Ukraine? Is America going to come and pay to rebuild Ukraine? They said, well, we got $300 billion from that we taken of Russian money, and we're starting to use it now. We're giving Ukraine loans from that. Where is Ukraine going to get the money to pay the loans if they don't even have money to rebuild? And its economy is going downhill. And part of these billions of dollars they're given is humanitarian aid for the displaced Ukrainians. It also goes in to pay the government workers and pay the soldiers. And so, war. So, Brown University keeps track of everything. Do you know that based on what we have going from the war on terror, it's going to cost us about $2.2 trillion just for VA benefits for the men and women who have been in the service since September 11th, whether they did their 3 years, 4 years. I do a lot of claims, and it's amazing. You have the younger people in the late 20s, early 30s getting 70, 80, 90% disability. 90% disability is almost $2,000. So basically, if I'm 30, I'm basically getting $25,000 a year. So if I live to 70 and I don't put any cost of living increases in, just think of it. That's 40 years at 2,200, at 40 years at 25,000. So every 10 years, it's equivalent to $1 million. So if that individual goes from 30 to 70 and is at 90%, it's going to cost the VA, the American taxpayers, at least $1 million for that individual. If you were to go look at it, the numbers that were service connected compared to Vietnam, Korea, World War II, they're much higher. The excuse is, well, we saved a lot of people that would have died compared to World War II or Vietnam. Yes, that's a good excuse, but it's really not a good excuse. And here's one. It's put out Department of Defense. Estimate cost to each U.S. taxpayers for the wars in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. You know, we don't pay attention. In this one, from 2001 to 2021, okay, and they're saying in fiscal year 2021, there's 224 million taxpayers. Afghanistan cost $34 billion. Iraq and Syria cost $7 billion. The total was only $41 billion in 2021. So it's saying Afghanistan was $151 and Syria was $33 for every taxpayer in. So you see how they go in and try to bring it down, and they say, well, it only cost $184 per taxpayer to fund the war. Okay. (2011, 2010). From 2006 to 2011, it averaged over $700 per year for every American taxpayer. So what they were saying for the wars was $1.6 trillion from fiscal year 2021 to fiscal year 2001 to fiscal year 2021. And when you look at the war, you look at it, you add it up. And so my cost for the war in Syria, Afghanistan, was $4,239. My cost for Iraq and Syria was $4,339. So the Department of Defense said, for those 20 years, Kris, you owe $8,278 to the war in Afghanistan and Iraq and Syria. So every war has a consequence. So the tax consequence, the average tax consequence spread over all people in all taxpayers in the United States. So that means each taxpayer should be paying $8,278. That's an average, because we know a bunch of people, almost 50% of the people in the United States do not have to pay taxes. So it's like looking at me and my wife. So my wife and I, it caught the Afghanistan war, the Iraq war, and Syria cost me and my wife $16,500 plus bucks. Just think of it, $16,500. We want to go to war because it's really nice to go to war and everything. But since World War II, the United States has been at war an awful long time. Hey, we did our 3 years in Korea, did not win. We did, depending how you look at it, we did over 10,000 days. There was a show about it in Vietnam. We didn't win. Then we go to Desert Shield, Desert Storm. The war was fought right. The politicians were kept out. And we won. We won decisively. The war was quick. Bingo. Then we went into Afghanistan. We got control, and we decided we were going to reshape the country of Afghanistan. Then we went into Iraq. We wanted to get the weapons of mass destruction out, and bingo, get rid of Saddam Hussein, get access to Iraq's oil until we found out it's illegal to do that. And we then let crappy generals, political generals, and some politicians get in, and it went down the tubes. Iraq, 21 years later, no stability. The Iraqis, read the thing, Iraqis are firing on American soldiers in Iraq. Give you a little hint. Brown University, like I said, totaled up everything. And wars are not simple. Wars is not like a game, a battleship or strategy or things like that on a board game. Wars have real consequences. For example, if you look at the Israeli Hamas, Hezbollah, hunters, that kind of stuff, Israel is now spending $1 billion a day. 18% of the people that are in combat and everything are away from their workplace because they were reservists. Also stating that almost 40,000 small businesses in Israel are going to go bankrupt. The reason why? The people are off to war. Research is showing that because these men and women are off to war, it's going to cost Israel about $67 billion in lost economic impact. Also, because of the cost of war, Now Israel is in debt by $41 billion, had to go out and raise over $30 billion. And like I said, $1 billion a day. What are they going to do? Okay. The second part is there's hardly anything that's really existent in Gaza. Who's going to pay to go? What about the Palestinian workers that used to work in Israel? So there's lost economic that they will never recover. It's getting so bad that Israel's credit rating was knocked down a notch. Not getting very good. And it doesn't matter. Israel is in a war. It can't win. It may win militarily. It should win militarily. But the collateral damage that has happened in war results in new enemies. New enemies that will be there forever, and it can cause Israel some serious financial problems going forward. So here's a bunch of stuff. In Afghanistan, all this has been certified. In Afghanistan, 2,298 people died. 8 Americans were killed in Pakistan. 4,572 Americans were killed in Iraq. 10 Americans were killed in Syria in ISIS. And 1 person was killed in Yemen. Civilian casualties, U.S. DOD civilians, 6. 6 in Afghanistan, 15 in Iraq, 1 in Syria. This is how we fight a new war. We reduce the number of soldiers and we contract them out to like Halliburton and BlackRock and other ones. 3,814 contractors were killed. So that keeps the U.S. soldier number down because the U.S. soldiers used to do a lot of that, and people just don't get as mad. 90 American contractors in Pakistan, 3,588 American contractors in Iraq, 17 in Syria, and 2 in Yemen. Just think, 7,500 U.S. contractors were killed basically in Afghanistan and Iraq. We don't hear about those 7,000 because they're just contractors. I'll skip national military. It's saying Afghanistan lost 64,000, Pakistan lost 9,000, Iraq between 48 and 52,000, Syria 51,000. Other allied troops, 1,145 in Afghanistan. Afghanistan was a good war because they were trying to get rid of Al-Qaeda. 323 other troops were killed in Iraq. Okay. Afghanistan, 43,000 citizens. Pakistan, 23. Iraq anywhere between 184 and 207,000. Syria almost 50,000. Yemen almost 12,000. Opposing forces in Afghanistan. We have said we've killed like 42,000. Pakistan, 32,000. Iraq, 39,000. Syria, 67,000. Yemen, 48,000. Journalists, a lot were killed. $157,000 people wounded. So, what is the cost? We haven't won in Afghanistan. We left Afghanistan. We came kind of really a laughing stock because it wasn't done right. The 13 American military personnel were killed. I still have a picture of that sergeant, the Marine sergeant, holding that baby that was probably only a couple of months old in her hands, in her arms, before she got killed. It sucks. It was political. Left tens of billions of dollars of equipment behind. Then we didn't like what was going on in Lebanon, Libya. So we attacked Libya to get rid of Gaddafi, and Libya is still conflicted. They have one side support by the Allies and one side that supports basically Libya. Then we have Somalia. We get different. So we're getting all these wars spreading out, spending an awful lot of money. And so it's really hard to find a cost to the cost for the other side. But when we say $9.6 trillion, that's the military cost. And people go, what do you mean? Okay. With these wars in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Liberia, Libya, and some of the other crossover effects, it put over 5 to 6 million people on the road to other countries. Germany, Sweden, France, Belgium, the Netherlands were inundated by refugees from Pakistan, people that were coming in, didn't know the language, didn't know the culture, but were looking for a safer place after years and years of war. Tens of thousands, probably much higher, died along the way. Women were raped, kids were stolen, but they were going. And now Europe has a problem. They haven't been able to incorporate all the migrants in. Some are capable of working, some are not capable of not working. And we in the United States did not figure, hey, no big deal. That's Europe's problems. Great Britain has a problem too. They're getting overwhelmed. They don't want them, and they're trying to block them, but they're getting there. People are dying crossing the channel, but they're getting there. Now, as we laugh and we talk about 3 million, 4 million, 5 million, 6 million, 7 million people, migrants that have that came during President Biden's term. Wait a minute. I thought they were supposed to be Mexican or Venezuelan or Cubans or El Salvador or Guatemala. But we have Afghanis coming in. We have Iraqis coming in. We've got Iranians coming in. Basically, all you do is make to the border, and if you're not on the border's nasty list, you get to come in. All you do is saying, we got Chinese from China. They're okay. Every single migrant that comes to the United States costs money. You gotta find them a place to live. We have a housing crisis, so if you put more people that, basic economics, if you got a limited amount of stuff, but you got more people that want to buy than you have to sell, the price goes up. Whether it's housing, it's food, you got medical costs, you got education costs. And so by America going to these wars, creating massive migrations of people, it's costing Europe tens of billions of euros every year. It is going to cost billions and billions and billions of dollars to integrate all the migrants into American society. You can say, hey, it's not going to be a big deal. Well, yeah, it's a big deal. And hey, if I was a migrant and I was a woman, first thing I want to do is get pregnant and have an anchor baby. So when we talk about the direct costs of war, like it says, since September 11th of 2001 to 2024, 9.7. Those are direct costs. And there, the VA, you've got to pay for the VA healthcare and things like that, and disability, but those are direct costs. Okay, now you have indirect costs. The Gaza has indirect costs. It has to be rebuilt. Southern Lebanon is so it's going to have to be rebuilt. Ukraine is going to have to be rebuilt. And NATO countries that are promising and providing aid to Ukraine, it's coming out of their economy. And they don't have the money. We don't have the money. The state of California doesn't have the money. Where some schools are getting overcrowded and they don't have the money. Where is the money going to come from? The federal government doesn't have the money. The federal government is getting really close to $36 trillion in debt. And looking at it, our presidents, and despite what Joe Biden or Kamala Harris wants to think, we still have Americans fighting. You can call it a war or not, but if you have 700 soldiers or more in Syria, and you have a lot more in Iraq, and they're getting shot at, and they're shooting back, I view all combat as really warfare. And so, $9 trillion. Most of that money, like for example, the $1.5 trillion of money, that discretionary money that the Pentagon was given, never existed. The vast amount of this $9 trillion never existed. Okay? My great grandkids and even their kids are going to be paying for the war on terror. Because most of this is in the federal deficit. In the federal deficit, the yearly tax is about $1 trillion. Look at the lost opportunity cost of $1 trillion. Can you picture what you could do for the quality of life for a lot of Americans with $1 trillion? $1 trillion, and you're not going to get a single penny of product out of that $1 trillion. It is just gone. All the president can do, tell the Secretary of Treasury to get with the Fed and tell the Fed, hey, we got no one to buy these bonds. The Fed buy $1 trillion worth of bonds. How many can they buy? Do they keep printing money to buy it? So, wars are constantly going to cost us money. Big money. If the Houthies shoot a missile that says for $2,500 at a ship, we in the United States can shoot a missile that costs $25,000, or we can shoot a missile that costs over $100,000 to intercept that missile that costs $2,500. Not really a good exchange. Not at all. There was an old song that was done in Vietnam by Edward Starr. It was called War. And he said, what is war good for? He said, only good for the undertaker. But you know who's making out? Boeing, Northrop, Raytheon. We have weapons manufacturers in the United States making record profits. Okay, we've given Ukraine $175 billion so far. So we go and say like 90 billion are for weapons. And go, hey, Ukraine, here's $90 billion, but you can only buy it off U.S. manufacturers. Israel, we've given Israel over 10,000 rounds of 155 ammo. We've given Israel plenty of 500-pound bombs and 2,000-pound bombs. Oh. Okay, well, how are we going to replace them? Arms manufacturers in the United States. So Russia and Ukraine being at war makes the arms manufacturers in the United States really wealthy. The Middle East war is making them really wealthy. And so, yes, I was in the Marine for 21 years. I remember when I was a second lieutenant in the Med. It's like, wow, it's exciting. I got to go to war. And then when you don't get to go to war, it's really disappointing because that's the only time you really get to find out if all the training you did was worthwhile. I have no objections to going to war to protect our country, things like that. But going to war to stroke someone's political ego, going to war to pay back arms manufacturers because they donated to your campaign is wrong. It is just wrong. And there are too many homeless people, too many people starving. And, oh, we don't like this airplane anymore. We're going to build a 6th generation aircraft. Don't worry. It might be 200, 300, even more $1 million for one aircraft. But hey, the manufacturers are happy. They're making money. And even if they build aircraft, expensive aircraft, at least for $150 million, like the F-35, that doesn't work, they still make money because DOD will ask for money and give extra money for the company that built the defective aircraft to come up with a corrective device. Correct the problem they created and we'll pay you more money. So if you sit down, you look at the military and you look at the war, but look at the indirect cost. The wars not only are very expensive, but they create mass migration because people cannot live in a war-torn area. For example, Egypt is scared. You know why they're scared? They don't want the Palestinians in their country because they know how expensive it would be. Because where they're going to get jobs, where they're going to live, who's going to take care of them? You just can't let them stay there and starve or die. As I walk around Keene and go shopping and stuff, I can see them going, what, more and more migrants are making it to Keene. I was in Sierra. There was 4 migrants. And they were going in, picking out the racks and getting stuff. And all 4 whipped out a card to pay for them. Every single one had an identical card. Could be coincidence. They all rang up big bills on that card, got a lot of clothing, got some shoes. But they were happy. But you know who's happy? Sierra's happy. Because when it comes to the bottom line, they don't care who buys. Walmart's happy because it creates more business. And so, but where is the money to pay for all the migrants? And like I said earlier, a lot of those migrants came to the United States as the result of American military action. And we're getting closer and closer to getting pretty close to an all-out war. Whether it's in the Middle East, or Russia and Belarus comes in, or it gets to the point where some country gives Ukraine the ability to put weapons deep into Russia. Russia could retaliate with tactical nukes. Then what do we do then? What does the United States do if Russia used tactical nukes in Ukraine? What happens if there's a sabotage and the nuclear reactor in Ukraine becomes a Chernobyl? Okay. Where we are right now was never supposed to happen. With Gorbachev and President Bush, that was basically supposed to be the end. They go, hey, this is the end of the Cold War. But one of the benefits of the Cold War, the people on the American side really went to war. The people on the Soviet Union side really went to war. So United States and Soviet Union were the big boys, and the big boys could tell their teams, no, you're not going to war. You can saber rattle, but you're not going to war. Bingo. Soviet Union goes down. Soviet Union's had some wars, Chechnya in a number of places. War in Ukraine. United States has a bunch of wars. But United States is still having troops in Africa trying to defeat Al-Qaeda and ISIS and some of the other terrorist groups in Africa. And all costs money. And like I said, it's costing us. And I don't think people understand. Let's see. Like here, according to DoD reporting, nearly 12% of all fundings appropriated through war-related requests have funded non-war programs. It's like, wait a minute, you're asking for money, but then since it's discretionary, you can spend it on anything you want. And it was saying it's saying about $2 trillion of all the funding was spent. The Army used that money to restructure the the DoD budget for fiscal year 20. It was $25 billion for combat support and to train people in other countries. Then $41 billion for indirect operation costs likely to remain even after the global war on terrorist combat has ended. Also funded European Defense Initiative and Ukraine security assistance. So, yeah, people got upset, upset at Russia going into Ukraine, but in fiscal year 2020, we were already spending money to support Ukraine security assistance. I didn't know that we were funding money. The American government was funding money to Ukraine in 2019, 2020. Basically, what they're saying is, like here, Congress didn't really have oversight of all of the money. And Department of Defense was able to spend it the way they wanted. It goes on and on and on. When does it stop? When does the United States have to go to war? We like our new situation because we don't have to worry about going to war. We just send a few people here, a few people there, and we don't have to tell anybody. How, one or two people getting killed here and there. It's just, I just find it mind-boggling that between DoD, the VA, and other secrets things, we can spend $1.5 trillion a year. $1.5 trillion. and we've already spent $9 trillion since 2001, and it's going to go higher and higher and higher. And like I said earlier, no one is counting the indirect costs of the war. Like the mayor of New York said, it's only going to cost the city $12 billion. Where is that $12 billion going to come from if it doesn't come from the federal government, which means it would come from the taxpayers? That means the city of New York is going to have to raise taxes, and the city of New York will continue to lose businesses because they had to raise taxes, which again is an indirect cost of the war. So, like I said, it's frustrating and it's hidden in a lot of places. No one talks about it. And then basically, almost everybody has forgotten about our wars. Done, it's over with, but there are thousands of men and women in harm's way. So, and that's again a cost. Cost in money, cost in lives. So, I'm going to wrap it up for now, and hopefully the United States will not be in combat in the very near future in the Middle East. And my grandson is on one of the ships, and I want to make sure he comes home safe and sound.
On the long road, won't turn around. Secrets in the shadows, lost and found. Truth in every echo, loud and clear. Keep on with the long road, no